This episode of the Restoration Today podcast is brought to you by Company Cam. Ready to ditch the disorganized texts and folders? With Company Cam, keeping track of the details of your restoration project is insanely easy, making communication between crews, insurance companies, and clients all the more streamlined. Photos can be annotated and users can create professional reports and branded before and after photos. Company Cam is the easiest way for restoration professionals to capture and organize job site photos. Visit companycam.com/C&R to start your free trial and get 50% off your first 2 months. That's companycam.com/CANDR to get started. Today, I am joined by a great friend in the industry. Josh and I have known each other for a while. He is a former Michigander, now lives in Texas. I'm a former Texan, now live in Michigan. I don't know if that counts for something, but hey, all right. I am joined by Josh Miller. He is the president of Rainbow International. He and I met, I don't know how many years ago now, probably at a Beyond event or maybe my first RA event. I don't know. Josh has been involved in a number of things and really grown in the industry up to being president of Rainbow where he is today. So Josh, thank you very much for joining me. Today, I'm kind of hoping that we're going to talk about Rainbow and Rainbow's growth and your growth as well. So go ahead, just introduce yourself first and share a little bit about your background and journey in the industry.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. First of all, I learned something new now just in this podcast that I did not know you're originally from Texas. So
for like 6 months of my life. So I don't know if it counts,
okay.
But I was born there.
Very good. So you're a proud Texan. And the other thing is that I just want to make sure that everyone knows that today it's November 29th, 2022, but Michigan did beat Ohio State on Saturday. So as all of our Ohio friends, Viola and everyone else watches this, Michigan whipped up on Ohio State. So it was a great day. That's now 2 years in a row. But my background is I've been in the industry. This is really all I've ever done in my career is the restoration industry. I had a brief 1-year stint where I tried to break free from the industry and worked at a car dealership as a service advisor in the service department. And friend of my dad said, hey, you'd be good at this. And I've never been yelled at so much in my life from the time people get to the service department till they leave. It taught me a lot about customer service and how to deal with people, but wasn't for me. So I came back. So I started in the restoration industry in May of 1996, actually working for my father-in-law in Michigan. He owns a small restoration company called Blue Water Cleaning and Restoration out in the Shelby Township, Port Huron area. And from there, worked with my father-in-law for about 7 or 8 years. And then that wasn't good. The family dynamics weren't unique enough there. So I went and bought a carpet cleaning business with my own father. That was an existing carpet cleaning business just north of like Washington Township, that up in Elmont, Michigan. And that was a unique experience. Loved my dad to death, but the two of us working together after like a year and a half, 2 years didn't work out. There wasn't just our view of how business should be handled. And he came from working at Chrysler Automotive. So very corporate background for 31 years. So I love my dad. It was a great experience. But where my career really kind of took off, where I started to become more involved with the RIA, the IICRC, is I met Jack White at John Don's Strategies for Success back in January of 2005. Sat next to him for a whole week, went through John Don's class, phenomenal class. And about 2 or 3 months later, Jack sent me an email and said that they were looking for a franchise business coach and wondered if I'd be interested in the role. So I flew down to Waco, Texas. Interesting point there is the first time I'd ever flown by myself on a plane. So I'd always flown with my wife or my parents or something, but flew to Waco alone on the interview. And they were crazy enough to offer a 29-year-old snot-nosed kid a job. And so I worked for Rainbow in 2005, 2006 for 2 years doing that, and then was offered a job by a gentleman that was one of the founders of Assured Software, Mike Naden. He was looking for a consultant and asked me if I'd be interested in coming to work with him. And so I left Rainbow. My wife and I, at the time, we only had one son, were very homesick for Michigan, living in Texas. So we moved back to Michigan, and then for the next 3.5 years or so, I traveled 21 days a month consulting with Mike, and was a phenomenal learning experience. Got to know a ton of people in the industry. And then one day my wife called and said that she was pregnant with our second son and that the travel had to stop. So since 2008, I have worked at different companies, worked in Augusta, Georgia, worked for a great company in Michigan, Concraft. Tony and Marianne Cremando own it. They're some of the greatest people you'd ever meet. And then in 2017, I was on the RIA board of directors, and Jack White asked me if I would ever thought of coming back to Rainbow. They needed a technical trainer for IICRC classes, and so I accepted that position in July of 2017. And over the past 5 years, just moved from technical training to vice president of operations, and then was privileged that they offered me the job as president back in July of this year. So kind of went all over the place. My wife was a saint to travel all over with me and follow me in this crazy industry. When I traveled and moved us around from Michigan to Texas to Georgia, and we ended up back in Texas, but love the industry, love giving back, and probably like a lot of people, just got in the industry and never really left it. Just grew within the industry because it's always been a good to my family and been a way for me to provide a living for my wife and our two boys.
So talk about your training expertise. I know you teach at least the WLS. Oh my gosh, I just totally blanked on what the RA advanced
Yes.
designation is. That what, right? Water
Yeah.
loss specialist.
Yeah,
Okay.
water loss specialist. Yeah.
WRT was okay, anyway, that's the
Yeah.
IICRC one. In my head, I was like, what's happening? Okay, so talk a little bit about your background as an instructor and the training that you've offered, more on the RIA level, how long you've been involved with the RIA. There's definitely, okay, I'm sorry, back up a little bit and explain to people who are listening the difference between like an IICRC WRT and getting like the WLS through the RIA, because there is totally a difference. There's a different level between the designations you're going to get through the RIA and then the IICRC certifications. And I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Michelle. So we'll talk about the differences first and then how I got involved in that stuff. But so the differences are the IICRC does a phenomenal job. 2019 now, it seems like, shorter, but in 2019, the RIA convention in Phoenix, Arizona, is when the RIA and the IICRC signed that agreement to start working together. And really it was focused around, let's focus on what each organization is good at. And so the IICRC is phenomenal at writing industry standards and then creating certification classes and certifying and approving instructors to provide that education. So when we start in the industry, and it's any of us, but when we start in the industry, usually the first class that any of us attend is either WRT, water restoration technician, or if you're on the cleaning side, you might go to CCT, carpet cleaning technician. And so what the WRT class is designed to do is to give you an awareness of this industry. I mean, I think back to when I started working for my father-in-law, it was as a carpet cleaning and water technician out on the truck doing the work. And when he interviewed and hired me, I was kind of like, okay, I can see why people would get their carpet cleaned regularly, but how many people really have flood damage in their house? I was kind of like, what am I going to do? Like 1 or 2 flood jobs a month or a year? Because it's just such a unique industry. You don't think that there's that many disasters. And then you find out that there's this whole industry and subculture around disaster restoration. So the WRT is designed to help people understand, okay, what is water damage? Where are the sources of water damage? How do we categorize the water damage? How do we figure out how much of potential evaporation there's going to be with classifications, health and safety? How do we make sure that we're protecting our workers? How do we extract the water? It's really book knowledge of all of the basics of the industry. It's just enough information so that you can walk onto a job. There's water damage everywhere. And no matter who we are, we won't feel like we're completely out of place. We're like, hey, I've talked about this. I understand that it can be repaired. And then from the perspective of, how do we manage and quantify the evaporation process so that we can have predictable results on the job as it processes through. So that's the WRT class. Then the IICRC created the ASD class, the Applied Structural Drying class. And really the name says it all. You're going to apply the information that you learn in WRT to a structure. In order to have a true ISD class, you have to be in an IICRC approved flood house where they flood the house. You go in there, extract the water, set up the equipment, and you talk about it with the instructor. Hey, what's going right? What's going in a way, I don't want to say wrong, but what's not going the way that we planned it? How do we make adjustments? How do we take all of our readings? How do we make sure we provide good documentation? And it also exposes you to different things, crawl spaces, tile floors, wood floors, carpet, but you're actually doing the work. So now you're putting your hands on the tools, you're putting the hands on the meters. And then this is usually where people stop their education. So you see a lot of people on their email signatures or on their resume, hey, I'm WRT ASD certified, which is a great thing. but they think that because they have WRT and ASD, they know everything about the industry, which could not be further from the truth. Our education should always be ongoing. In fact, I encourage people to go back to classes sometimes to see what's out there, or go to different instructors, because there's such a vast difference. And it's a lot of talent in our industry with the instructors. We think about Ken Larson, Jeremy Reitz, David Hodge.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about Joe Dobbins, different instructors I've had. Mike Shulo worked at PuroClean for a long time. Now he's out in Las Vegas, was my first IICRC instructor ever, and really gave me a lot of passion for this industry. But you get different perspective on how people teach. Chris Curto is a guy that teaches here at Rainbow sometimes. So you start to pick up different things that help you. So one of the first things I'd say in this is, don't ever be happy that, hey, I went to one WRT class, I went to one ASD class, I'm done forever. But after that, then you need to start to continue to build on that. So the IICRC has their Master Water Restorer designation, which really is right now, the IICRC and the RIA, I'm on a committee where we're looking at a career path with how do we integrate the Master Water Restorer and the water loss specialist, so that people can see that there's a career path and what the benefit is to all this education. So after that, you start to take other classes: commercial drying specialist, health and safety technician. The IICRC has some new designations they're working on that'll be coming out soon with regards to like building construction identification. The RIA has building science, which is a phenomenal 2-day class. When I took that for my certified restorer, helping you understand the building science that professors have come up with as to, drainage planes, air barriers, vapor barriers. Project management class. Violand has their 2-day project, or has their week-long project management, with Tim Hull. The RIA has a 2-day project management class. So all of this education leads you to the water loss specialist, as you said. And the water loss specialist is really the capstone designation in the industry of water damage, so that when you receive that designation, you should be able to run any job that you're on, be a project manager, be the subject matter expert. But the part that sets RIA designations apart from the IICRC, one of the primary things, Michelle, is that in order to get your designation, you have to write a formal report. And so that's one of the hardest parts of the RIA, for at least it was for me and a lot of the students as we teach them, is you have to write a report that is free from opinion bias or from the way you see things, but rather use the industry standards, use OSHA standards, use college textbooks, or use building science textbooks to say, here's what I observed, here's what's happened, and here's my opinion based upon these other texts of what should happen next, so that it's defensible to a third-party building consultant or a third-party expert or an attorney if you were to be put on the stand. So that's really the biggest difference, is writing that report so that you could hand that to someone and say, hey, I went out there, I have all of this experience, here's how I came up with this expert observations. And it's your opinion, but your opinion is based upon defendable textbooks, defendable standards or laws. It's not just, hey, Josh Miller and Michelle Blevins think this is what should happen. It's Josh and Michelle observed this based on their experience, and we quote reference sources.
Yes. Okay. All right. So I want to go back a little bit, I guess, in the Rainbow direction and talk about, all right, first kind of paint a picture of what Rainbow looks like, because Rainbow's under the Neighborly umbrella, so part of a much bigger company with a lot of other franchises underneath, right? So what are some of the other companies within the Neighborly franchise system?
Yeah, so Neighborly is the world's largest franchisor of service brands. So you think of anything to do with home services, Neighborly probably has a brand for it. Now, I don't want to try to quote them. We're up to 19 North American service brands. We've just bought 2 more companies in the past 6 or 7 weeks. I think we're over 25 service brands internationally. It could be approaching 30 worldwide. Neighborly is a dynamic, growing company, a phenomenal place to be a part of a team, learn leadership, and help support people in their dream of owning a small business. So you think about in North America, anything to do with home services, Neighborly probably has a brand for that. So we have Molly Maid, Mosquito Joe, Mr. Rooter, Mr. Electric, Mr. Appliance, Grounds Guys, and I'm going to miss some of them, Air Serve. The brands that I miss are going to be mad at me. So I'm going to, Window Genie, but we have 19. We just bought Junk Kings out of California. So it's a company that deals with dumpsters and removing junk from people's properties. So anything to do with home services, we probably own a concept around that. So Rainbow is
Okay.
one of those concepts. Rainbow Restoration, a Neighborly company. You'll see that on all of our stuff.
Yep.
And the concept around Neighborly is that our desire is to be kind of the Amazon of home services. So when we start at the Neighborly level, we think about, and all of us do this, especially we had Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we're going towards Christmas. But if I wanted to, last week, as I moved back to Texas about 7 months ago from Michigan, I needed to buy some stuff to cook with. And so I go to Amazon immediately. Hey, I need a cutting board, or I need a potato masher. I don't go search potato masher on the internet. I go to Amazon and I look for it. So Amazon houses a bunch of different services. That's the concept around Neighborly, is that we want people to think of, hey, I need home services. So I'm going to go to neighborly.com, and I'm going to find what I need there. So once you get to Neighborly, you can type in, how do I get my, I need lawn mower, I need landscaping services. Well, the grounds guys can handle that. I need restoration. Well, Rainbow Restoration can handle that. And then there's obviously an ability to cross over, just like Amazon. You go to Amazon and you start finding stuff you never thought that you would find there, but you might have a need for it. Same thing at Neighborly. When people come into Neighborly, we want them to understand that we have a large selection of high-end, very high-quality customer service-driven companies that can do anything around the home. And if we don't have it, we know where to find it. So Rainbow, I'm proud to say, was the founding company of that. We were founded back in 1981. Neighborly used to be called the Dwyer Group, but we've been called Neighborly for the past 4 or 5 years. But it started with Rainbow Restoration back in 1981. We were actually called Rainbow Carpet Cleaning and Dyeing. And then in the early 2000s, as carpet dyeing became harder and harder, when we got into like 5th and 6th generation nylon carpets, Stainmaster carpet, the same thing that keeps our kids' Kool-Aid from staining the carpet, makes it very hard to dye the carpet a different color. So we moved into just carpet cleaning. And then as the disaster restoration industry started to mature and become more prominent, Rainbow switched over, or we made a strategic decision to start focusing on strictly restoration, which is where we're at today. We still have franchise owners that do a lot of carpet cleaning, but our primary focus, as our name says, is Rainbow Restoration. We're a restoration company, and that's what we help our franchise owners to focus on and be successful.
So how many, even approximately, Rainbow franchises are there nationwide at this point?
Yeah, so in North America, we're over 335 franchises, give or take a few, in the United States and Canada. And nationwide, internationally, because we have franchises in the UK and in Germany as well, we're over 410 locations internationally now.
Does training look different for the UK and Germany? I don't know anything about what the industries are like over there. They must be different, yes?
Yep, they're very, very different. So the business training is pretty much the same. Hey, you make a certain amount of money, you spend a certain amount, and you want to have a profit at the end. So that's the principles of business are pretty much the same. There's a little bit of differences in how they work with the insurance industry for restoration. The UK, Germany, even Canada, those different countries aren't quite so adversarial in the way that they interact with the insurance industry as we are here in the United States. They have relationships where, like in the UK, for example, insurance companies will actually put all of their claims out to bid. And so they'll say, hey, for the next 2 years, we're going to assign 50% of our claims to whoever wants to bid on that. So any restoration company can bid on it, but you actually submit a bid for what you're going to charge, like per air mover, per dehumidifier, for the next 1.5 to 2 years. And then if you win the bid, you get all of that work from that insurance company. So it's very, there's a lot of, I say symbiotic, there's a lot of working together in the UK because you're tied into this contract unless you want to break it, the insurance company, vendor, or the franchisor, or the restoration company if they're an independent. But you really want to make that work because you've committed to each other for a certain period of time versus just one job. The technical training is extremely different because in Europe, they look at the United States as a throwaway society. We build houses and they get to be 40, 50 years old and we think they're old and we need to get a new one. In the UK and Germany, all over Europe, they have buildings that are hundreds, if not thousands of years old. And so they have to figure out how to dry those buildings because they're not going to tear them apart the way we do here in the United States or even in Canada. So extremely interesting how they do it. They have dryouts in the UK that regularly take 20 to 30 days, and the insurance company's fine with that. Now, their rental rates for their equipment are much different, and the way that they process it is much different. But I actually went to Rainbow UK's annual convention back in March. It was in Birmingham of the UK, the first time I'd ever been to the UK. But their equipment, Michelle, was amazing. Like, they have equipment that'll run for days and days, and it's whisper quiet. You can hardly hear it. But when they hear us talk about drying buildings out in 2, 3, 7 days, it blows them away, because their average dry out is around 3 weeks over there on a lot of these projects that have these old stone houses that have stone walls, concrete floors, and it takes a long time to dry it.
Okay, so we don't have to get too far into this, but I was thinking about what you said about pricing. Like, here's the price of an air mover for the next 18 months, 2 years, whatever the contract's for. How's that working out when there's big inflation? Like, I know some European countries face, and we face, and you don't always know that's coming. So you could face a year into the contract, holy cow, this is going to cost me double. You just deal with it and hope for the best.
Yeah. So our franchises in the UK are actually under a master license. So they have a managing director, kind of like the president of the UK. That's my counterpart that we talk on a monthly basis. What they do is they're usually 12 to 18-month contracts. And so then they come back up for bid. And so, yeah, if it's 12 months, then they just have to deal with it. And they try to anticipate what that's going to look like. But the same as here, they're giving a volume discount at a certain level to say, hey, we want all of these, we want all of this work. And so in exchange for that volume of work, we're going to have a price that works to where we can still make a profit, but it also is fair to the insurance carrier. But yeah, just like here, inflation over the past 12 to 18 months in the UK has been something that's been a challenge for them.
Yeah.
The other part is that thankfully the restoration industry, a lot of the people that I talked to when I was at their annual convention, they were an essential service like we were here in the United States and Canada. But really unique to see how they went through COVID the past couple of years, versus the United States going through COVID versus Canada. I mean, Canada seemed to have a lot of lockdowns, a lot longer than we did in the United States. We don't have any rainbows there, but you have Australia, the UK. It was just interesting to watch that, how they had to interact with that of doing the work, but then the inflation as well. So yeah, I'm sure that there's clauses in there. I haven't been as a part of that negotiation process because they're a master license. They handle that on their own, and they ask for help if they need it. But I'm sure they have clauses in there that if things get way out of control, that they can work with that. But no, for the most part, once they have that locked in, they're locked in. Because I know when I was over there having dinner and talking to people, there was, over the past 3 or 4 years, there's been a number of different contracts where some of them worked out well, and some of them they said, hey, we learned a lot from this, and we're gonna bid it different as we move forward.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. I like hearing how restoration works in other countries, and everybody's a lot different than we are. So
yeah,
for whatever that means, whatever that's worth. Okay, so I'm curious if a lot of your franchises stateside, a lot of the people who own a Rainbow own other neighborly franchises, because they all kind of work together, right? So they can complement each other well. So does that happen where people are often buying multiple franchises?
Yeah, so we have, I think we have over 100 different franchise owners that have multi-brand concepts. We call them multi-concept owners. Yes, you can do that. So you think about, the one I think about is obviously Mr. Rooter and Rainbow. There's a connection there. Like, hey, we called the plumber out because there's a leak. And so there's just this natural tie-in to who dries this out. And if you say, well, we can dry it out, we're going to call we also own a restoration company, or we have a sister company here at Neighborly, or an affiliated company we'll call Rainbow Restoration. You think about other ones such as like Molly Maid, if people that are willing to pay to have their home cleaned on a regular basis, their apartment, they could call Window Genie to get their windows cleaned. 5-Star Painting is another one just popped in my head. We have House Masters Home Inspections. They're all real property management. Make sure I try to mention all the companies so these other brands don't get mad at me, but there is a natural correlation. What I would say, however, is that we have people that own multiple concepts, multiple brands, but we're also very cautious about who we approve to do that, because, there's a wise old book, the Bible says you can't slave for more than one master. And so what we find is that we want people to be in business with one concept for a number of years before they think about adding the second one, because once you start to divert your attention as a business owner, instead of being really, really good at one business, you're kind of average, or you have a lot of irons in the fire at multiple businesses. So we do have people that are extremely successful We've had one owner that actually owns 4 different concepts within Neighborly, 4 different Neighborly brands, does a wonderful job. But what we try to make sure we walk people through is, do you have your systems in place for the first company that you own? Is it running the way that you've liked? Have you optimized everything before you start to consider a second one? And even as they bring other concepts on, we're highly encourage them, or we coach them, that they need to have managers in place at each business to run the day-to-day, and that they're more of the high-level thinker that's helping to set the strategy and to think of different ways that they'd like to grow their businesses. To have one person trying to run 4 different, or even two different businesses, that would be a lot out of someone, especially as they try to maintain harmony between their personal life and their business life.
How often is someone buying a franchise and they're the people actually doing the work for the first little bit before they're hiring their first employees? I mean, are you training people, even
Yep.
like when you were the technical trainer, training them how to do the actual restoration and dry outs before, and then they get bigger jobs and hire people?
Yep. So I would say with Rainbow Restoration, the other concepts I'm not as involved with, but at
Yeah.
Rainbow, I would say it's probably 70 to 75% of the time people are actually doing the work when they start. So one of our vision is to be so beloved, we become a remarkable household name. Like, hey, we're out there, we're doing this, or to become so beloved, we become a household name. The way we do that is by delivering amazing customer service experiences, so that people have remarkable time with us. So what I would say is that we have people that are drawn to Neighborly and to all of our different concepts because they want to own their own business. And we're a values-driven company. We have the code of values, and that drives everything that we do. So as we train these individuals, a lot of them come from, as I mentioned, my dad worked at Chrysler for 31 years, then he retired. 51 years old. He reminds me about that all the time, that I'm only 5 years away from what he set the goal for me and my brothers. But so we find people that they work in a corporate environment for a long time, they retire, or maybe they come out of the military. So, Rainbow Restoration was the founding member at the IFA, the International Franchise Association, of VetFran. And so we provide discounts for our veterans and try to get them involved in owning their own small business to meet their goals. And now there's it's a huge initiative within the IFA of VetFran. So we find individuals that they want to own their own business. They want the freedom that owning your own business provides. They want the opportunity of taking those profits and reinvesting them into their family or into their business. But to start with, yeah, they have to do the work themselves. And I have a ton of respect for them, because to own a business and then to go out and do the marketing and the sales and then to do the work, you have to have a lot of dedication and an extremely exemplary work ethic to get that up and running.
So, all right. So we talked about the technical training side of things and learning how to actually dry out a structure, whatever that may be. But talking about the customer service side, soft skills is equally as important for restoration, maybe even more so than the technical skills, right? You have to have the right soft skills or you're probably not going to go anywhere. Customers are going to hate you and kick you out of their house. So what kind of training do you do or recommend to your franchisees to learn how to, like, say you're working at Verizon or these other places, they're not necessarily working with people that are in a crisis or having like the worst day of their lives. This is completely different. So what kind of training do they go through to learn how to work with customers who have gone through a fire or flood or whatever that may be?
Yep. So we have like our new owner training, which is a number of weeks long, whether that's virtually or in person. And part of that training involves, hey, this is what's going to happen. And you said it, Michelle. I don't want, but we try to help people understand the easiest part. Even as I've been in this industry 26 years, the easiest part of the industry is putting houses back together or businesses back together. Like the actual hanging drywall, painting, putting carpet, that's easy, and I can repair all of that stuff. We might lose historical buildings, or we might lose family heirlooms in terms of like pieces of paper or pictures. But what I tell people, even as I was out in the field, is that as long as people were not hurt physically, like unfortunately, I've been at jobs where people have passed away in the fire, or they've been burned. And so that's something I can't repair. And so when they're in training, we try to help people understand that. We're like, understand that the biggest investment that most people will ever have, their home, their financial investment, has just been wrecked. And in their mind, even if it's one bedroom's flooded, they think that it's never going to be the same. And so we have role playing, we have training where we walk them through. How do you approach how do you walk up to the house? We have like Rainbow Restoration's world-class steps to customer service to train your technicians. What questions do you ask them? But really, a lot of it is just when you're interviewing, as we interview or as we select people to award them a franchise, is helping them to understand that we're in the restoration business, but we restore lives and then we can rebuild properties. But restoration, our tagline at Rainbow is restoration begins now. And so the restoration that begins now is really restoring people's peace of mind and their trust in the fact that their home can be there. So we try to help people to, as they're going out to the house, to tell them, listen, you're going to have people yell at you. You're going to have people tell you, demand that they want things. Understand this has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the fact that their home has just been destroyed or their business has been destroyed. If you can help get them through that first hour, 2 hours, that first 24 hours, and empathize with where they're at, and then lay out a plan with how you're going to put things back together, but just let them know that you're going to answer your phone and you're going to be a shoulder to cry on, you're going to go a long way in this industry. If you can't handle people yelling at you, and you can't handle when people call you up and they're mad about something, the adjuster or the fact that a subcontractor showed up late, or they're not really yelling at you as a human, they're yelling about the situation or they're frustrated with the situation. If you can't handle this or handle that, this probably isn't the industry for you.
Probably not.
Yeah.
So, okay. So one more question related to training. What do you recommend to people who get adjuster pushback or are struggling to get their scopes approved and their invoice, maybe not even their estimate, their invoice approved by an adjuster? What kind of advice do you give your franchisees who might be struggling with those things?
Yeah. So one of my favorite sayings, my mom used it all the time, was you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar, Joshua. I can hear her saying that all the time. And even in personal, yeah, that's what I knew I was in trouble.
Yeah, that's right.
There's only 2 or 3 people that ever use that name in my life anymore. But so what I tell people is, number one, understand that you're going to have to do a lot of educating work, because when we look at, there's a huge changeover in a lot of industries, including the insurance adjuster industry.
Yeah.
And so a lot of adjusters are retiring. A lot of adjusters are leaving the industry because they might be burnt out or they want to do something different with their life or their career, just the same as we all want to do it. So as you get new people that come in, I have 2 sons, one of them's 24. And so I think he could become an adjuster tomorrow. And that's fine. Smart, very smart young man. He's never built a house in his entire life. And so if he's doing his job and he's on a job that I'm on, what I tell our Rainbow Restoration, as people buy a Rainbow franchise, I tell them, you're going to catch more, you're going to get a lot better results if you call somebody up and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about the job that we're doing at Michelle Blevin's house. And I want to share with you what we've done, and I want to answer any questions that you've had. Or you might say, hey, I noticed that you didn't approve my estimate, or you've asked me to make some changes. I'd like to walk through this estimate and see what your thought process is, because I have a few questions on why you made decisions you did, and I'd like to share with you why I did the work the way that I did. If you start the conversation off that way, what I've found over the past 25 years is that it goes a whole lot better than when you start the conversation off with, I work for the homeowner and I don't have to answer any of your questions and my bill is my bill. You have the right to do that. And there's a lot of people in the industry that think that that's the way that we should handle claims. And I'm not here to say if that's good or bad or right or wrong, but my personal experience is, if you can call people up and say, I'd like to walk you through my thought process, usually you get better results. The other thing too is that we train, and I know that whether it's Balfour, Rainbow Restoration, ServPro, Fleet Services, you think of all the companies that are out there.
Yep.
Everybody's training to, and everyone's saying, the more you can communicate during the process of what you're doing, and then document that in whatever job management software you use or an exact analysis, the better it's going to be. So that's the other thing is, as you start to learn the industry, you know that if you're going to tear out a wood floor and it has to be torn out, it's better to call right up front and get someone on the phone and say, I want to let you know what I need to do and answer any questions you have before I do this. Because up front, you're giving them professional logic. If you tell them afterwards and you didn't give them an opportunity to be involved in the process, it really sounds like you're making excuses and trying to justify your bill. And there are days when, we all deal with adjusters that we swear that they're paying the bill out of their own checkbook, just like there's contractors that are horrible at their job. I find that those, they're getting to be a little bit more frequent where people are a little bit more unreasonable. The way I view it, Michelle, is it kind of mirrors our society right now. Society just seems to be going through a lot of turmoil, and we see that no matter what side of the political aisle you're on, people tend to not talk as much. They just argue. But what I find is that there's still the majority of people in life want to show up to their job, including adjusters, do a good job, and go home to their family. And they don't want to worry about having to answer questions why they did their job wrong the next morning.
Yes.
So the more you can communicate and the more you can say, hey, let me share my expertise with you. And if you could please share your expertise with me as an adjuster or a claim reviewer, I'd appreciate it. Tends to have better results.
Amen to that. Amen to all of that. Okay. All right. Before we wrap it up, we talked a lot about Rainbow. I want you to put your RIA hat on now. How long have you been involved with RIA in some capacity?
So I went to my first RIA convention in 2000, and I want to say it was 2010. And I believe the first one was in Colorado Springs, Colorado at the Broadmoor. So I went to two of them. It was 2009, 2010, or 2010, 2011. But I went to the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs, and then we had one in downtown Atlanta, and I can't remember the years. Were my first two conventions. Then I took my certified restorer class in November of 2012 in Dallas, Texas. So probably the past 10 or 11 years now, I've been involved with RIA.
Okay, so I am a huge advocate and pro RIA as well. And the RIA also has come a long way and made some big strides and changes with education, with the AGA, all of those things in the last few years. The convention this year was incredible. I can't recommend the convention enough. So give us your best pitch for the RIA. Why do people need to join the RIA? Now is a really good time to do it if you're not a member.
Yeah, I think you just said it, Michelle, is number one is now is the time to join. The energy around the RIA is phenomenal right now.
Yeah.
There's a ton of new people involved. One of the things that used to drive me insane, I mean, I understand a little bit why people would say it, is, oh, it's an old boys network, or it's like the old guard. People don't want to let you get involved. First of all, I don't think that I found anything to be further from the truth since I've joined or been involved with the RIA. I got my certified restorer in 2013. I got pinned in Las Vegas, and I said, hey, I want to volunteer. And I was on the certification committee within 2 months. And then after that, I moved to the education committee because I wanted to be an instructor. And from there, I've been on different committees, the board of directors. I currently serve as the director of education till next year's convention when Marcy Richardson will take over, and she's going to do a phenomenal job in the education world. The biggest thing with the RIA is that when you show up, just get involved. So I know you asked me like, hey, why should they get involved? What I'll say is when you get there, get involved, talk to people, make sure that you get on a committee, even if it's just a committee like you and I have worked the past couple of years, the fall technical conference. Start small where you're not committing yourself to years. Maybe it's just a month or two. But when people see that you're going to show up and you're actually going to do the volunteer work that you've said you're going to do, you're going to have too much volunteer work because they're going to call you all the time. Why they should get involved, though, is that for a long time, the RIA and even I would argue the IICRC didn't know who we were or who they were. So the industry, there was just a lot of turf wars going on. Like, hey, we can do it all. As I mentioned earlier in our discussion in 2019, through the efforts of, Mark Springer, Lee King, people at the RIA or at the IICRC, excuse me, Craig Kersmeyer, Kevin Pearson, their board of directors, we had an understanding of, okay, the RIA is the industry's oldest, most experienced, and the best trade association you can be part of. They're getting things done. The IICRC is out there to write standards and create certification. We don't need to try to go in each other's lanes. So since that time in 2019, when we had the AGA started and we had this agreement between the IICRC and the RIA, there's just been a ton of energy because we knew what to focus on. The other thing is that, we had Mark, well, when I was on the board of directors, Chuck Violan was the president. Then from Chuck, we went to Lee King, then from Lee to Mark. Now Katie's doing a phenomenal job. Ben Lupra, I think, is the president-elect. He'll be the next president. So we've got operators that are actually doing the work. They're younger. I mean, I'm 46. I think Mark's a little bit younger than me, 44, 45. I don't want to guess on Katie's age. She's 29. But we have younger people involved that are doing the work, and they're from franchises, they're from independents. And so the reason to get involved is that if we don't get involved and understand how to work together, what the future of this industry looks like is not like the brightest picture, because the insurance industry is banded together and they're extremely strong. And this is something that Mark, Katie, everyone says. But the reason to get involved is that, number one, it's going to help your career more than anything. You're going to meet some of the greatest people you'll ever meet in your life. I mean, our restoration industry is made up of some of the most generous people I've ever met.
Yes.
The second thing is at the RIA is where you meet people that are really doing things.
Yes.
I mean, I think of like Mark Springer, Katie. You meet Ken Larson as an instructor. I pick on Ken only because he's a good friend. You've got Russ Palmer out in Arizona, Jacqueline Carpenter in San Francisco. You're meeting people that aren't, and I'm not, we all start somewhere in life. So if we started a restoration company tomorrow, you and I together, we're going to have no revenue. And we want to grow to 15 or 20 million or 100 million, whatever our revenue goal is. But when you go to the RIA, you're talking to people that they're doing big jobs and they're doing big numbers, and they've lived through the pain of where you are if you're a newer company. And so don't feel bad that, hey, you're doing $500,000 or $1 million or $3 million. That's phenomenal. Be proud of that. But come talk to people at the RIA that have been where you're at and can say, hey, here's some of the challenges that you're going to have. And I'm here to help you, because they will pick up the phone. I mean, that's the RIA has done more for my career in networking than anything else that I've ever done. Right now, I can pick up the phone and call Katie, Mark Springer, Jacqueline. I can call you, Ken Larson, and immediately get an answer to what I need. And so that's why I would say to get involved at the RIA is because you're going to have people that they might be your competitor in the same area, but they're really going to pick up the phone because they want to see the betterment of the industry, so that it provides more opportunity for all of our teams and our team members.
I could not agree more. I agree. The relationships within the RIA are the best. Okay, Josh, anything else that you want to add before we wrap it up? We've talked about a lot.
No, number one, I would say you mentioned it. If they were in Orlando next year for the RIA convention, that's the first thing. So make sure that you register as soon as you can.
It's sold out before. So yes, register.
And now that we're coming out of COVID, living with COVID, whatever, register early. Be a dynamic convention. We want to sell this thing out. The other thing is that if you're interested in, advanced designations for the RIA, by all means, reach out to me. I'm happy to help however I can. Christy Cohen, our executive director at RIA, will help you. Roberto Rickards is our new education liaison. He's doing a phenomenal job. But look at those and get involved. Education at the RIA is, first of all, go get all your ICRC prereqs and then come to the RIA advanced stuff. But the last thing I would say is, just as the president of a large franchise organization at Rainbow, is really, when we look at where this industry can take you, or as a business owner, there's tons of opportunities out there. But just make sure that when you're doing this, that you set goals. Number one, why are you doing this? That's the one thing I see, is that a lot of us can get on the hamster wheel of just doing what we're doing. But what is your end game, or what does the exit look like? Why did you start your career? Why did you start your business? So set goals and then build a plan from there, and then just work hard consistently to get there. And I personally think that franchising is a phenomenal way to hit the goals you have in life. Rainbow Restoration is a great opportunity to do so, or any of the other neighborly brands. But I appreciate you having me here today.
Well, thanks, Josh. It's always fun to catch up, and congrats on all of your career growth, fast growth that you've had in the last few years, especially. And I look forward to seeing you at convention, if not sooner.
Sounds great. Have a great afternoon.
For more Restoration Today, visit our website, cnrmagazine.com, or find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts.